Welcome, Magnus here, and today I'm going to talk about two franchises that definitely need a movie or a show, preferably a show. If you're new to my channel, definitely consider subscribing. I talk about nostalgic games that come back to life, and occasionally I talk about different forms of media for these old games that do come back to life. And although we've seen franchises actually do pretty well, like The Last of Us, or kind of well, but could have done better, like the Shenmue series. Of course, I had to throw that in there. But today I'm going to talk about two franchises that are perfect for the medium, and if done right, they can actually get more fans. Not like they really need more fans, because they're pretty amazing, but to translate the media could be huge dollar signs for these studios if they actually know what they're doing. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is the God of War storyline, the God of War series. Now, God of War is relevant and actually does pretty well for Sony. The God of War series that's come out actually within the last few years for PS4 and PS5 have done pretty well. And they've taken the God of War series, which was God of War and then God of War Ragnarok, and it's taken it to the next level of gaming. But those stories, as amazing as they are, it's not the origin of Kratos' story. The origin of Kratos' story starts with the first three games, God of War 2, and God of War 3. Simple to remember. Now, I've got God of War Collection next to me, which was a combination of God of War and God of War 2 back in the late 2000s, and of course, right as the PlayStation 3 was coming out, you had God of War 2. Now, those were pretty great games, but the stories themselves, having to deal with Greek gods and having to deal with, like, of course, taking down Zeus, those were amazing stories that were being told. And I think that story would be excellently adapted to potentially 1, 2, or 3 movies. Not so much a series, but potentially really good movies if told well. Now, the one thing that I praise The Last of Us for getting right was sticking as close to the source material as possible, almost copying dialogue word for word, and if not, changing a few things that actually stretched out the episodes, but really expanded on the story of the first Last of Us video game. And God of War has enough potential story with the first 3 games to make it a pretty strong either condensed movie or, you know what, potentially a season of television, which would be amazing. Now, you've got to take that and, of course, translate close to the video game material. See, the one mistake that Hollywood has done with so many video game movies, and there are a few franchises that change up a lot of things but still got it right, such as the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, and even Super Mario's kind of stuck close to the source material, but you could really expand on that source material. But if you want to do something that's so story-driven, like the God of War series, you've really got to take it back to what made those games' stories so good. And God of War has the potential because it can be successful because it not only pulls from the video game franchise with the original character like Kratos, but also comes from a mythology that's already well known. So you'll have a lot of new fans that are unfamiliar with the video game series, but that'll look at this and say, you know what, this actually is something that I'm familiar with. A new story, a new take on Greek gods. And Greek gods themselves is something that's been explored throughout television media. So I think that that series would do incredible on television. So I think that whether on TV or whether a few feature-length films would be amazing. Now, you should not try to cram all 3 God of War video games into one movie, because then you're condensing it too much. And sometimes that's what Hollywood likes to do, and unfortunately, that could come back to bite you because you rush so much, you lose a lot of that world building and a lot of that personality in the characters that you can get when you expand the story, such as in a series or multiple movies. So that's the God of War series that I believe would do well on television. But the other series, of course, is the Metal Gear Solid series. Now, Metal Gear Solid stretches multiple games, but it's more than Metal Gear Solid series where the story actually takes place in, because you've got Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 that were released in the late 80s and in 1990 with Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake that actually incorporates a lot of their story into Metal Gear. Now I'm holding up the the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, which included Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. But I would want the series to really start off with potentially retelling Metal Gear Solid, skipping Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, and then expanding there with stories that take place in different time periods, such as you say Metal Gear Solid, which references Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 a lot, and then you go back potentially with another movie or another series that goes back to like the events of Metal Gear or Metal Gear 2, or Metal Gear Solid 3 goes back to the 60s. So you have a lot of different micro stories that you can tell that are interconnected with Metal Gear Solid in general. A lot of people say that, okay, you know what? Metal Gear Solid really deals with the character of Snake, Solid Snake. But I don't agree with that completely. You have so many characters that this series actually highlights and really takes on. Like, you do have Solid Snake, who starred in a couple of the games, actually the most games than any other protagonist in the series. But Solid Snake wasn't the only one. You had Solid Snake, who highlighted Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2, Metal Gear Solid, and then he was Metal Gear Solid 4. But then you have so many other games that didn't have him as the main character. Here's a spoiler alert. Metal Gear Solid 3 was Big Boss. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Big Boss. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, and Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, both were different characters, believe it or not. Ground Zeroes was Big Boss. The Phantom Pain, you were Venom Snake, which is a totally different character. Metal Gear Solid 2, you were Raiden, totally different character. But as you can see, you were different characters in these different games, so you can tell multiple stories, use different protagonists in the whole collection, and you've got a ton to go by. A lot of people who played the Metal Gear Solid series say that the story is incredibly confusing and gets convoluted. What better way to actually explore a different way of telling the story than either multiple movies, or what I would prefer, scrap the movies, because I know that the Metal Gear Solid movie has been in production hell for so many years. I can remember around Metal Gear Solid 4's timeline, before that was released, you had Avi Arad next to Hideo Kojima talking about how Metal Gear is an incredible franchise and that they want to produce a movie for it. Here we are, damn near, over 10 years, 15 years later, and we still don't have a Metal Gear Solid movie. And I think it's because, how do you tell the right story? Now, from what I hear right now, they've got Jordan Von Roberts, who's there to direct the movie. You've also got the main actor for Solid Snake already chosen, but you don't have much more than that. So sure, they want to do a movie, but how do you compact even the story of Metal Gear Solid into one movie? There's so many mini stories to tell within that one video game of Metal Gear Solid that it makes more sense, to me at least, to make it into a television series rather than, just try to compress even that one game into one movie. I mean, how do you do that? We'll see. I mean, because there's so many nuances and details to tell with that movie, which is why I think the collection, and you've got so much material in this that you could expand on the video games if you do a proper miniseries or a full multi-season television series on Metal Gear and actually make it worth it. So that's kind of my two choices that I have right now in mediums that not only will entice fans, but it will bring in new audiences. Now, I mentioned that the God of War series, because it has those Greek gods that you can pull into the series, that it could be successful. But what does Metal Gear have? It's not only an action, espionage, spy type of show, but it could also be based on different theoretical and political aspects of modern day society. Those who are fans of Metal Gear will definitely remember Metal Gear Solid 2 that actually was so meta with its telling about like the information age and the fact that you could manipulate based off of memes and based off of like what you see on like social media and other aspects of the internet, where you could control information. And then the Patriots, which were a set of like off-screen super bosses that really control the world. I won't spoil what they actually are, but the fact that they control that digital information age and trying to control society so that they can pretty much shape the world as they see fit, that is so relevant in today's culture. So if you build off of that, you'd have so many eyes interested in it. So I really think that this series would do so well in today's society, along with God of War. So what video games franchises do you think would be better introduced in a television series or movie type of format? Because I think Hollywood might be getting a little bit tired of the superhero fatigue and all of that. But video games themselves, we've been getting movies for years based on video games, but I think it's going to start to catch fire when you use the right franchises. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm back. Had to take a hiatus for so many different reasons, but always producing content. That never stops. So I'll continue to produce for you guys. And as always, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.